I think I should introduce my coffee cup at the beginning of every episode.
That's a
this
cute
is
one too.
this is my no, this is not my clown cup. Because coffee cups, they change how the coffee tastes.
Sure,
for sure. But this is Erica's, and she'll be mad at me that I have it. Did you know that she
Does it have a more of a feminine sort of a flavor?
Yeah, it gives it a little more bouquet.
Yeah.
No, what? So, like, Erica wants to be a clown.
I did not know that.
Nobody would, because she's like the most straight-laced,
serious,
straight-faced
person. She never laughs at my jokes.
But that's what she like. They have all those clowns at the BCH clowns. Have you ever seen them? Patches, and I don't remember what they are. And she's like, "That's me. I could totally do that." She'd be like the straight clown that was tripping over herself.
That's so cute. It's like we all have this kind of, I wish I was an astronaut.
Yeah,
She's
she
like,
wishes she was a clown.
I could have been a clown.
So she got a clown coffee cup. So
nice.
Today, I'm stealing Erica's cup.
All right. Welcome to Talking in the Chasm, compassionate, controversial conversation between best friends, holy man,
and an atheist. Are you the or an?
I'm
this week?
yeah.
We'll go with an.
Yeah, I'm an atheist. I've been converting people.
Have you?
Yeah. So now there's more than just me.
No.
There's a few of us out there.
So
now.
it's going the wrong way for me.
Yeah. This is having the opposite effect of what you wanted. Okay, so today we're talking about the Popo.
The police. We didn't start with a frame of my tattoo.
We did not, and also we didn't introduce that I'm Felix.
And I'm Matthew.
Yeah.
It's good to remember, because we know.
So tell me about your tattoo. What are we talking about again?
Back in the old days, not like the Old West, but the
skinhead days.
The skinhead days. There's an anti-police slogan that's very common with punk rockers and skinheads. ACAB. It means something not nice. It means that all police are sons of unwed mothers.
Ah, okay. And you have that tattooed on you.
I have that. That's my only tattoo.
Oh, Matthew. My wife works for a tattoo removal studio. It's called Disappearing Ink, and you're going to want to go there to get your tattoos.
Get your ACABs removed.
This is a sponsored post, so you didn't know that. Okay, so yeah.
So I'm starting with a prejudice.
So yes, in fact, I think the reason that we wanted to talk about this is that you have told me that you feel like you're straight up racist against cops, and that it's something that you wish that you could change about yourself. You know, we all have
things about us that we don't like.
Yeah, I wish that I could love everybody, and that I didn't carry anger or hatred, and I do. I mean, there's a few people that I just can't talk to, and it's hard to forgive people, and so anyway, but about the police,
so
we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so let me start with a disclaimer, because most of the things that I believe, I want other people to believe. But this is more a category of a bias that I have. You know, I try to be mindful of my community and my faith when I articulate and advocate certain things. But this is not one of those things. This is one of those things that I feel like is more of a struggle that I have. It's something that's difficult for me to put in proper categories, and it's a really complex issue for me, because so I have my past experiences, which it's not like I was ever beat up by cops or anything,
right.
But I had this whole cat and mouse youth with the police, and they were the one side and I was the other side, and I don't have any I don't have any naivete about how much the cops are always on our side. So that's one thing. And then on another more like philosophical level, I I have a certain kind of opposition to the powers that be. Like, I see Jesus as the ultimate radical, and I see the nation that he's instilling as, in certain regards, antithetical to the power structures that be. Like, in a classically political sense, I believe in a Jesus revolution. That the powers that be are in opposition with what Jesus is trying to do in the world. And then on the last level, there's all this kind of like, there's this social injustice that's happening,
Right.
indiscriminate rates of incarceration, sentencing guidelines, all this kind of stuff.
When you talk about the difference between Jesus and the way that it is now, are you talking about that now it's sort of power rules?
Yes.
That it's like the one with the most power is
Yes.
okay, yeah.
Force and coercion is how the world moves.
Yeah, and I agree.
And so, and I have a kind of complex theological framework for how power structures exist. Like, there's a famous passage in the Bible in Romans chapter 13 that describes state authority, and it says that the state is ordained by God. They're his minister for wrath, that they bear not the sword in vain. And what that means is that there's a framework that says men don't act well. They have problems.
They can't be trusted.
Yes.
Honestly, yeah.
And so, in order to reward good and to punish evil, there's these civil structures in place. And essentially, the Christian view is that the world powers, but all of them, not just ours, all of the world powers are there so that you can't steal from the market, you can't rape, you can't kill indiscriminately. And all those things are true, whether you're talking about Pharaoh's Egypt or Hitler's Germany or Mao's China or Bush's America. You can't steal from the market, you have to do what you say, you can't kill your neighbor. Like, all of that's in place in every civil society. And so that's a framework that these powers are necessary from a certain perspective, but they're also temporal and antithetical to God's ultimate plan.
And can I just say that it's sad that we consider them necessary? I mean, it's sad that you can't just say don't rape people, that you have to enforce it, that we have to have a group of people with guns to walk around and make sure that we're
Nobody
not
does that.
raping each other.
But we do recognize, both of us would recognize that that's true.
Yes. Yes. So my sort of framework is that I'm a white male with enough money to live, and I have every advantage in the entire world, and police are, for the most part, nice to me. I don't fear being around cops. I mean, if a cop walks up to me, I'm not immediately afraid for my life. And
not for your life. But do you get the heart flutter when a cop pulls up behind you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't get pulled over very much because I drive safely and don't speed. but I am aware that a huge percentage of this country does not feel safe when a police is... I mean, it's interesting. When I was a little child, my parents were always like, oh, the police are your friends, and if you ever have any trouble, just go up to a uniformed cop and you can ask them for anything, and they're your friends. Meanwhile, black families are like, okay, if the cops come up to you, you immediately do whatever they say. You show
Keep
their
your hands
you
visible.
move slowly, you are completely compliant,
Yeah.
And when a cop walks up to me, I feel slightly safer. When a cop walks up to a black man in my exact same position, they feel less safe. And that's a horrible, horrible injustice. It's a terrible thing. So I can't pretend to understand what that's like, what that would be like to be discriminated against immediately, offhand, because of the way that I look. I will tell some stories, but I have been harassed by cops many times because of the way that I look, long hair and tattoos and stuff. But I chose to look this way. I made myself into what I am. I mean, I knew, I'm putting myself on the fringe of society.
That's kind of the point.
Right, it's why I did it. I'm trying to say I'm not part of whatever. But so I did that. If I was born a black person, I didn't choose to. I'm not putting myself on the fringe of society and deciding to be harassed by police. That just comes with the territory. So I'm going to talk about police brutality and stuff, but not from a position not of a position of pretending to have any idea what I'm talking about.
Sure.
I don't understand what that would be like. And it hurts my heart to hear the stories.
Yeah.
But I have a friend who is black, and he just succinctly put it so well. But he said, whenever black people are in a dealing with the police, their job is to de-escalate the police. That's the job.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that is, compliance.
Yes, sir.
I mean, your whole job, because you come into it with the police in a state of escalation. That's never been well, it has been a few times, but that's not my experience. That's not my world experience.
Uh-huh.
And as of now, the police come to this beautiful neighborhood in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and to a bunch of white people, and I don't feel like I have to de-escalate them.
Yeah.
So,
I think in my interactions with the police in my youth, we actually we were the escalators.
Right, you were just intentionally
deride the police and
right.
intentionally difficult. Which, if we were black kids, that wouldn't. I mean, I suppose black gangs do that to the cops too, but
right. But you might be dead if
yeah,
that was the case.
We were never worried that we were going to not walk away from that encounter.
Right. So let me maybe, do you have a story that you want to tell, sort of about how you became where you are with the police?
I have different interactions. I think the reason I feel the way I do about them, just kind of trying to be self-analytical, is that I don't trust power bearers. I don't have that doesn't inspire confidence in me when people are effectively the sword bearer. When it's do what I say or else, I am immediately suspicious. I'm suspicious of intentions. I'm suspicious of abuse of power. I'm suspicious of putting up anybody that has a category of life where if they have a bad day, if they wake up on the wrong side of the bed, everyone they encounter that day is going to have a bad day. And that kind of egomania, it just makes me immediately suspicious of the whole category.
Yeah, my problem also in that way is that it feels to me as if we are distributing this power completely arbitrarily.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to be a cop, you go to this school, and then you have power.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people don't have no business with power. We both read this book. You recommended this book to me, and it turned out to be one of the best books that I've ever read, called On Killing. Mm-hmm. And the premise of the book is that humans don't want to kill each other, that interspecies do not want to kill each other, intraspecies don't want to kill each other. Just briefly, so there's interspecies, right? Like if a lion attacks me, I'm going to try to kill that lion, okay? Because that's fight or flight. Whereas intraspecies, if you attack me, it's called posture or retreat, right? And that is, you're going to try to beat me up, and I'm going to try to beat you up. I'm not going to try to kill you. I'm just going to try to prove my superiority.
It's a dominance, not a killing.
And it's sort of ingrained that humans don't want to kill each other, that it's very difficult.
So, for example, rattlesnakes don't bite each other when they fight over mating.
Exactly.
Piranha don't bite each other. They slap each
Beetles
other
with
their
their huge mandibles, they don't try. If a snake attacks a beetle, the beetle will try to kill the snake, whereas beetles against beetle, they just try to knock each other off the branch.
They don't kill their own.
Right. So, and then, of course, the book talks a lot about how in the Civil War and even up until World War II, I think they said 80% of the people, soldiers, would rather die than kill another soldier, even in self-defense. That it's difficult to teach people to kill another human being.
Even in the trench warfare of World War I, when you're literally staring down the barrel of a gun, people still choose to fire over the enemy, or tend to the wounded, or run for ammunition, or anything.
Anything except
kill.
Right. And then we learned how to kill people, how to use how to use the psychology from this book, basically, to teach people to kill. And so,
especially in the latter end of Vietnam.
By the time we got to Vietnam, it was 90% people would actually kill. So, but anyway, one of the things about this book is that it says that about 2% of the soldiers enjoy killing. Okay, and that, you know, roughly corresponds to the psychopath in society. That 2% of us are psychopathic without empathy, and with, you know, you're told to kill, you just kill, no problem. And I am wondering if the police attract the psychopathic because the whole idea of self. So the psychopath is the interest in the self, and the disinterest in outside of the self, and power is certainly a way of asserting yourself. So I'm just curious. I would be interested to know what percentage of the police are psychopaths versus the percentage of regular society, because I just have a feeling that it attracts psychopaths. So, you know, not only are they in more power, but they have less empathy, just by virtue of the job that it is. You know, the reason that soldiers in World War II were only 2% is because it was a draft.
Yeah.
I mean, now if soldiers who want to become soldiers, they would be, in the Army there would be more than 2% of psychopaths, because those people are attracted to that job.
I think that's probably a controversial thing that a lot of people would have a problem with, but even whether or not that's true, whether or not there's a higher incidence of that, which I would tend to agree with you, it's certainly people that are drawn to power. It's certainly people who want to use coercive force.
Yeah.
And in general terms, I think the people who want to use coercive force are probably the last people that should have it, especially in an unchecked manner. And so when I look at law enforcement, policing in America, especially in a post-war context, we had all these kids that go over to Afghanistan. They were doing whatever they were doing there in Iraq, and you come home, and what are you going to do? How are you going to normalize after shooting people in Fallujah? And so policing and law enforcement is a natural outflow of a military career. There's a lot of ex-military in policing and security in general, and then you have like this soldier mentality, and I think that's what's working its way into our society. When you look at in the last 5-7 years, these really explosive and often racial violence that happens with the police, whether it's Eric Garner in New York or Philandro Castillo, and I don't know if all those police officers were ex-military or not, but it seems like there's something that's coming into law enforcement and policing, and it looks like militarism. It looks like there's an attitude among a number of police that say, I'm treating the population like an enemy combatant.
Yeah, I mean, when we were kids...
This isn't Mayberry.
Yeah, exactly. When we were kids, it was Mayberry more. I mean, when I was a child, police officers, the police department didn't have tanks.
Mm-hmm.
They
APCs
didn't have
and
bazookas, and I mean, wow.
Yeah.
We've militarized the police in a way that is frightening.
Well, in the 90s, I can remember Eric and I, our whole gang being stopped by the police in a park at 1 a.m. drinking, and like, I don't know, if there's 15 of us and 2 cops, not a one of us got frisked. All they did was check our names and stuff. Like,
yeah.
I can't imagine that happening nowadays.
Right.
Maybe it shouldn't have then, but that's the experiences we were having with the police back in those days. They'd pull a whole lot of us over, and not a one of us got frisked.
Yeah. Well, I also want to say that I respect the job of a police officer, and I think that it is extraordinarily difficult, and oftentimes, you put your life on the line in between a bad guy and a good guy. You're the one that runs into horrible situations, and so I do respect that and understand it a little bit. But maybe I'll just tell my story.
Yeah, sure.
Of sometimes that police were not nice to me. One time in particular, I was getting tattooed, and we were coming back from New Hampshire, and it was my brother and a girlfriend of ours and myself in a rental car, because you couldn't get tattooed in Massachusetts. We had to drive to New Hampshire to get tattooed, and then we would drive back. And
Why couldn't you get tattooed?
It was illegal, yeah.
Tattoos were illegal in Massachusetts?
Yeah, until like 10 years ago.
It's so funny how puritanical this place
is. Yeah, right? So anyway, as we're driving there, my brother's driving, and he kind of, swerves off the side of the road just a tiny bit, and Sky, the girl that was with us, like freaked out. She's like, "Oh my gosh, you're driving like, you gotta..." So he, for the rest of the trip, was just staring straight ahead, absolutely perfect, And on the way back, a cop comes behind us, lights flashing. We pull over, and the cop gets out. It's in the middle of the night. It's snowing, and he walks to the car, and his hand is kind of on his gun. And I am thinking, what a terrible job. This poor guy. He has no idea what's waiting for him in this car. I mean, it could be a shotgun to the window. He has no idea. What must that be like? I mean, I was immediately like, man, this poor guy, right? He comes over and he asks my brother, give me your license. And my brother said, what's going on? What was I doing? And he says, you know what? Get out of the car. And he takes my brother out of the car. And I said, what's going on? And he goes, you know what? You two out of the car. So he takes us both out of the car. And then he puts us against the car and starts searching us. And putting his hands in our pockets and pulling our pockets out and all this stuff. And then he goes back to his car and he calls other cops, and there's two other cars come and lights are flashing. There's 3 cop cars all around us, lights are flashing, and I'm like, what is going on here? I start to get a little bit scared because I'm like, we did it. I don't understand what's happening. And they're searching all over everything. They end up taking Sky's purse and just dumping it out on the seat and going through it. They said, open the trunk, and we opened the trunk, and it was a rental car. It was brand new. There was lint, and and one of them goes, "Well, it's pretty clean, Jim," And they were just on their hands and knees digging through our car. So one of them turns to me and he goes, "What did you do with the drugs? What, did you throw them out of the car?" And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't do drugs. I don't even smoke, I don't drink. He goes, "Oh yeah, you're a perfect angel." And my brother goes, "As a matter of fact, he is." So he said, "What did you do with the drugs?" As if drugs are present. We're not questioning that. We're questioning what you did with them, right? So as they're patting us down and they wouldn't let me put my hands in my pockets even though it's freezing cold outside, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I am completely in these people's power. I mean, they could just throw a baggie on the ground and go, "What do we have here?" I mean, I have no idea. They can do anything they want with us. Yeah. And it was a terrible, scary, awful feeling. So anyway, they don't find any drugs because we don't have any drugs. And then they say, "Okay, get back in the car." And then we hear them talking amongst themselves. And I overhear one of the cops ask the other cop, "Well, can we at least get them for speeding?" And I'm like, what? Why? Why do they have to get us for something? I don't know. This is awful. So the cop comes over and he hands my brother a ticket, and it says failure to keep right, $100. I'm like, does that mean the line, or we didn't stay on the right side of the road, or does that mean failure to keep right, we were in the wrong? Honestly, what is this? I don't even know what this means. So I call my when we got home, I called my good friend Keith. His father was a captain of the Orlando Police Department. Great guy, love him. He's super cool. He's practically a father to me. I called him up and I told him what happened, and he was immediately like, "Okay, they can't search you without feeling threatened. They can't go into your car without probable cause. There's no reason that they would." He's like, "You need to call internal affairs and say that they did this." So I was like, I don't know. But Sky's father was a district attorney or something, and he ended up calling people. And then I got a call from the FBI a week later that said, "Oh, we understand that your civil rights might have been violated." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So I just, told them what happened. And then they called a few weeks later and they said, "Your civil rights weren't violated." But we did.
Civil rights are perfectly in order.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. So, but we did contest the ticket, right? Because we're like, we didn't do anything. And we decided that my brother should be the one that goes and talks to them because I look like I look, and my brother looks a lot more conservative. So we go to the police, and we go to the courthouse in Newburyport, and the courthouse is on the top, and the police department is on the bottom. They're in the same building. I'm like, they have freaking lunch together, right? So we walk in there just totally like, oh my gosh. And my brother explains what happened, and the judge says, well, it is clear that you were mistreated. However, the cops wouldn't pull you over for nothing.
Of course not.
So I'll reduce the fine to $50. So that's what happened. So that's what happened. That was my bad experience. I didn't get shot. I didn't get killed by the police. I didn't have drugs thrown on the ground and get, for them to save face. They didn't, plant drugs on me. Any of these things could have happened. So it's not a big deal, right? So except for that feeling of, oh my gosh, I have no power.
So why doesn't that color all of your interactions and opinions?
Well, it's interesting because after that, I moved to Florida and I got this little tiny convertible, like a Triumph Spitfire.
Oh, nice.
Okay, yeah, it was cute, and and it was like $2,000, right? Because it's a piece of crap. But I'm driving around, and Sarah, my wife, is with me, and we got pulled over, I would say, 2 times a week. I'm not exaggerating. Twice a week, a cop would pull us over, and I'd be like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, where are you going? What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, we're going to band practice." And he's like, "Okay, what's in the trunk?" I'm like, "My guitar." He's like, "You want to show me?" I'm like, sure. And I opened the trunk, and he's like, oh, what's in that? And I was like, that's my guitar case. My guitar's in there. He's like, yeah, you want to show me? Open it up. There's guitar.
What's in the guitar?
Yeah, right? I know. Yeah. And then...
you want to break it open for me?
And then he put... Yeah. You want to Keith Richards, that thing? So, and then he would pull me off to the side, and then he would take Sarah out of the car and goes, where are you guys going? Yeah, what's going on? And to make sure that our stories match, right? This happened all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's because I had long hair and tattoos in a place where there were people that did not have long hair and tattoos, right? But again, I did this to myself. I'm not pretending that this is some sort of, prejudice, racial anything. So there were lots of negative experiences that I had with police. But in my sort of desire to not hate people and not prejudge, I really do try very hard not to judge people. But I'm not saying that it didn't color, And then
people aside, what about the institution?
I mean, I saw the movie Serpico.
Yeah, right.
And here's a cop that wants to be good and doesn't take money that the others take. Mm-hmm. So they consider him an outsider and that he's gonna snitch or whatever, so they stand by while he gets shot in the face. And so part of me is like, well, you join the police force and you do a drug bust and there's $80,000 in cash, and the cops turn to each other and go, well, there might as well have been
2 for me.
Yeah, there might as well have been $70,000 in cash. What's the difference? You get 5, I get 5. And if you are in a position where you say, well, that's wrong, I don't want to do that, now you are suspect to the other police. So part of me is like, is it possible to be a good cop? I mean, I do, honestly, I believe that most police officers go into this job because they want to help people. They want to do good. They want to help people. And then they're put in this framework, in this institution where maybe it's not possible to be a good cop. I mean, and I don't know. Are all cops on the take? I don't know. I don't think so. But you're in a situation that's difficult. Sure are. Right, and I also feel like sort of like this arbitrary thing is like we've got these inner city kids and half of them become gang members and the other half become cops. It's almost like, oh, I'll take this side, I'll take this side, but we're coming from the same.
That's how we always felt about them. We always felt they were just the gang in blue. Like that was just their colors. Like they acted and operated the same way we did. They thought about themselves the same way we thought about ourselves. Like there was a lot of recognition in my youth that you guys are just a well-funded, respectable gang. And I think that carries through. And when you hear a community trying to rein in their policing and add community input, when you hear stuff from police labor unions, like they think of themselves as a separate class of people. They're the special ones. They're like the Marines of civilians. Like you don't understand. We understand us, and just be quiet and do what you're told, and we'll take care of you.
Be quiet and do what we tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my friend's father, the police officer, he's not a police officer anymore, but I go to his house once a year. They live in Florida now, but I go down to run the marathons, and I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks. And last time I was there, he was talking about how, this ridiculous Black Lives Matter campaign and how idiotic it was. And I was just like, okay, just I didn't say anything. But when this Black Lives Matter sort of campaign caught on, and I like most white males, was just like, don't all lives matter? I don't understand, why are we saying Black Lives Matter? Isn't that sort of segregation? But I think that what it means is Black Lives Matter too. Yeah. It's like we also matter. Yeah. And when you hear about...
Not more, but the same.
Yeah. And these shootings that you see, I mean, now that we have YouTube, we actually see what's going on instead of just stories, he said, she said kind of thing. I mean, I saw a video where a cop shot a black guy and then dropped a gun as he was walking by, because it was unjustified. If there's a gun, then it was self-defense. So it's stuff like that that just makes me so angry and so upset. And I would say there's a problem in this country that being black is a crime, and that's a problem.
Or a presumption of guilt, anyhow.
Right. I mean, Sarah was telling me about an article that she read where kindergarten teachers were they were given a group of kids that were, playing, and they said, what do you think about this kid? What do you think about this kid? And the black males, they said they were more aggressive than the white males, even though they were doing the exact same thing. Even black teachers said they're more aggressive. Yeah. So, I think that the police are colored in that way to sort of see that, and also I feel like police gets called in for a domestic violence thing. Okay, they go in there and there's domestic violence happening, and then they pull them apart, and then they get another one, and they get 10 of these a night, and then they get called in for a rape, and then they get called in for a burglary. And I mean, you just see the worst side of humanity all the time, every day. Nobody calls a cop and says, my 10-year-old's having a birthday, do you want to come and help blow out the candles? No, they don't do that. It's all just the worst side of humanity. So I can see that it would become difficult to not see everybody as a criminal, because that's what you see all the time. And honestly, we're all capable of doing something horrible. Sure. And we've all done things that are horrible, that we were embarrassed about, or that we, so I understand that as well. This is part of my empathy for police, is that I see, okay, it's hard, if you happen to live in an inner city and you happen to be patrolling black neighborhoods and you see a lot of crime, you start equating crime with black people. Even though that's not true, that's what it looks like to you, and it's impossible not to feel that after just the constant barrage of of witnessing the behavior.
I tried to the last few years especially, I've been trying to deconstruct my own attitudes towards police, and it's not easy for me to do. It's been surprisingly tenacious in my psyche, and I don't understand it as well as I wish I did. I think part of it's like this residual rebellion that I'm prone towards for a whole host of reasons. But I had an experience, earlier this year. I was driving like down Pleasant Street in Arlington, and a cop passed me. And I got that cops like flash through my head that happens every time I see a cop. And as I was driving away, I didn't have anybody in the car with me. I was just on my own, and I was like, why do I feel that way? Like I don't know that guy. I don't know anything about. I didn't even see his face. Like I don't even know who he is. Like just the symbolism of that institution causes that ire in me. And that's not reasonable. It's not a sensible conclusion, because I don't know him. I didn't have any interaction with him. I'm making all these assumptions, and what I determined then is that comes from the story I tell myself about myself, that I don't like cops. And I was like, well, that's obviously not healthy. Like, why would I want that? Why would I want to not like a class of people?
Well, and also police are living in a world where many people feel that way.
Yeah.
So in a way, they're being prejudged when they walk in the room that oh my gosh, this is a power-hungry jerk who I don't like.
So I was trying to think about, well, how do I undo that mechanism? And what I came to is that I just need to tell myself a different story about myself. Tell myself I don't have a problem with cops. Like, when I see them, try to think differently and create a new pattern of behavior around those things. I've also thought, I almost walked into the Medford police station one time and just went up front and said, I don't like cops. I feel like I need a friend who's a cop. Do you have anybody, like a community outreach officer I could have over for a barbecue or something? Because that's what I would do with another group of people that I felt some kind of prejudice about. I'd try to make a connection and say, how do I connect with you, just like from On Killing? How do I personalize you? How do I make you a human instead of an institution, somebody instead of something? And I think that would be helpful for me too.
Well, I work with developmentally disabled adults, and every now and then there's crossover with mental illness rather than mental cognitive disabilities from biological or whatever. But we had a guy who had schizophrenia, and at one point he like flipped out and said, I'm going to kill you, and he was like, trying to break into our apartment, and he was being super violent, and he punched his father and broke his pinky. He was flipping out, and I had to call the police. And they came in. They're very kind and gentle with this man, put him on a gurney, handcuffed him. They had to do all this stuff because he was still screaming and foaming and flipping out. And they took him away, and I felt safer. I was like, I'm glad that I didn't have to try to restrain him. I'm glad that these professionals came in, and they were very professional, and they took him away. And then a few days later, a cop came by, and he said, we're sort of testing this idea of having a mental health officer, and that's me. And I just want to know, how did it go with you? And also, is there anything that we could do to help people like you, the people who deal with this population of people? Is there something that we can do to be better? And it's just like, gosh, this is so great. So while I've had some scary bad experiences, I've also had wonderful experiences where the police came and I just felt like, oh my goodness, this is so great that these folks exist.
I think one of the residual issues I still carry is like, I've never understood the premise of support the troops and not the war. Like, that idea is absurd to me. Like, you don't get a war without the troops.
I feel like Vietnam was ghastly, and this book talks a lot about all the different ways that the Vietnam War was just terrible to the individual people. They didn't get a chance to decompress, and they didn't go in as a group and out as a group and take a month boat ride to talk about their stories and to decompress. Instead, they go in and out of companies. So you're the new guy, and then the new guy comes in, and then you get taken out, and so you're shooting somebody in the jungle, and then 3 days later you're on the street with no parade, no fanfare, anything like that.
It's horrible. But what I mean by that is that, like, if like, support the troops mentalities, like, if you look at the Iraq War, if the Iraq War was unreasonable and unrighteous, and I think that both of those are easy cases to make, and unprofitable for any of you, just considering America's interests.
Well, my point was about the Vietnam thing is, I think that's where the support the troops came from, is that we feel terrible about what we did to the soldiers. So now we're all like, oh, thank you for your service, to sort of make up for the fact that in the past we spit on them. Especially
when you had a draft.
Right.
Like, I feel like that's a different thing. Like, if the government's holding a gun to your head and saying, go in the army or we're going to throw you in jail, what are you going to do? But now we have a volunteer army, and people are choosing to go to fight unjust wars.
And so the support the troops thing is, I think, is sort of a residual from the Vietnam thing, and from what you're saying from volunteers. So I understand that mentality.
Sure.
But I don't condone war.
Sure.
And I think the whole thing is ridiculous, and I don't support.
Well, the only
people
reason I
killing
bring
each
it up
other.
here in this context is that there's a similar construct with. So I've never bought that with our military. Like if the war is bad, the soldier is bad. Like if they're shooting people that shouldn't be shot, they're bad. I don't care who told you to.
Right.
If that's an unrighteous action, you have enough sense, like I do, to know that's an unrighteous action. You shouldn't do it. And if you did it, then you're a part of the problem.
Which is why they didn't do it in the Civil War and in World War II.
So then now if we come back home and we talk about law enforcement and you talk about like sentencing disparities between crack cocaine and blow and just coke, like white drugs versus black drugs. If you talk about incarceration rates, if you talk about the war on drugs, if you talk about things that all of us, obviously not all of us, but plenty of us know are just wrecking society, there's a set of troops that's causing that war to happen, and that's causing these incarceration rates, that's causing black and white police officers that are throwing people in prison for these drug crimes, for nonviolent offenses, for all kinds of things. And I can't, like, so here in Massachusetts, they had that crime lab. There was that woman who was running the crime lab, and she was falsifying results, and they had to overturn, I don't know, 10,000 cases, 10,000 drug cases here in this county. And you look at that and you're like, there's an institutional problem. And what becomes really bad about that scenario is that all of the members of that institution are so myopically self-defensive, we could do no wrong, and it always this imposition of like a mass of people that have to say no. Like you have to have a riot, you have to say, you have to bring in thousands of people and riot in the streets to get anyone in the institution to pay attention to something being wrong, and then it still doesn't get accountability like it should. And all of those factors, I don't know. I think my takeaway, I want to learn to fix my own thinking about people because it's not right sometimes. But institutionally, I think that my takeaway is that these things are just never going to be just. We're societies are trying to do the best they can. We try to put rules in place, but if you're going to give a group of people power to coerce other people, that's always going to be fraught with injustice and
right. I mean, we make laws, and then we need to enforce those laws because people won't just follow the laws on their own. That's the sad thing. So we need enforcement, and in order to have enforcement of law, you need to distribute power.
Yeah.
And it's going to be arbitrary. I say this, imagine a world where teachers and police officers are the highest paid, most well-respected jobs that there are. What a difference would that make? The problem is nobody wants to be a cop. I mean, who wants that? You get to be and see the worst of society every single day, all the time, plus your life is in danger. And people hate you just because of the uniform that you wear.
Yeah, they're making
it's a difficult
$140K a year
situation
here in Massachusetts with overtime.
Yeah.
It's not chump change.
Yeah.
So let's just back up. When the guy pulls you over back when you were a kid, and you look out the window and you're like, this poor guy, he's walking up here, he has no idea what he's doing. It's funny that you read that situation that way, because coming from the other side of the legal spectrum, coming from the criminal side, I'm like, he's playing the same game I am. Like, he likes this. That's why he's a cop. He wants this. This is what he feeds on, just like I do. Like when I was in a gang and we were running around playing cat and mouse, like, oh, that's your part to play and this is my part to play, and I like my part and you like your part. And I always made that assumption. Like when he's walking up to the car, it's that adrenaline, that's why he's a cop. Not because of the pay, not because of the badge, not because of the prestige, because he's the kind of person that likes that thump.
Yeah. I mean,
he likes the edge.
That might be, but still, routine traffic stops do turn into bloody murders.
Yeah, they
and
do.
That's got to be terrifying.
Sure.
It's on some level, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
Yes. This is interesting. In Massachusetts, we passed there was a judge that recently said running from the police does not constitute probable cause.
Yeah.
And so Sarah said she read that article, and she told me about it. Sarah reads all the articles and tells me about them, and then I pretend like I know what I'm talking about.
This is a Massachusetts state judge?
Yes. And so I did some research to see legally what that is about. And the only thing I could find is Illinois versus Wadlow that said running in a neighborhood where crime happens is reasonable suspicion. Okay? And
That's
is
a pretty low bar.
subject to search and pat down. All right? So
if you're jogging through a high crime neighborhood, you're
susceptible to being searched
that's
and patted down.
probable cause in and of itself.
And when we say high crime neighborhoods, we mean black neighborhoods. And when we say we're going to pat you down, we mean black people. Okay? This is ridiculous. And so this judge in Massachusetts says if you're a black man and a policeman makes eye contact and walks towards you, it is perfectly reasonable for you to run away. Okay?
Yeah.
That is not probable. You're running away. So they talk about, well, it's your right to move where you want to move, right?
Freedom of movement.
We can walk.
Yeah.
So if I want to walk away from a situation, the speed at which I walk away from that situation should not...
immaterial.
Yeah. So if I want to run away from the police, and the police, obviously, I get that they're like, oh, he's doing something wrong because he's running from me. Well, no. Maybe he just saw on YouTube how 4 people got shot in the back for doing nothing, and he doesn't want to get shot today. Yeah. So I haven't found that there is a law that contradicts this, that says that running in a neighborhood where crime happens is reasonable suspicion. I think that the Massachusetts judge just said, I'm not going to follow that. The judge said, running from the cops is not...
But does it matter what the judge says?
Right.
Because anybody running from the cops is going to get chased and likely shot in the back.
Right.
And then not prosecuted. The cops are not going to get prosecuted.
Right. And then we have
the fear, fear for your life too. Like, who can't say that? Like, a reasonable, a justified shooting is fear. Like, all a cop has to say is, "I was afraid, and that's why I shot him."
Well, I'm listening.
There's no more metric than that.
I'm listening to a podcast right now about a woman. This was a case you probably heard of, but it was a woman, a police officer, was finished up like a 13-hour shift, and she went to her apartment building.
Yeah.
She lives on the 3rd floor. She accidentally went to the 4th floor. She walked in. There was a black man, happened to be an accountant at like Price Waterhouse, and
in his house, just watching TV.
Watching TV, eating ice cream, and she shot him and killed him in his own house. And she said, she just kept repeating, I thought it was my house, I thought it was my apartment, I thought it was my apartment. I walk in there and he's there. But
why pull the trigger?
Right.
Why not?
The only thing she can say...
You got the gun, you're in the power position.
The only thing she can say is I was afraid, but that's not... It's not true every single time. It can't possibly be.
Yeah.
Nobody heard her say, "Show me your hands."
Yeah.
So, and every now and then, like in her case, it does get, the right thing does happen. I mean, she gets prosecuted for manslaughter or whatever. I mean, obviously she didn't premeditate, I'm going to go in, I'm going to kill somebody today.
There's a fantastic podcast on Freddie Gray. Remember, he was the one that in Baltimore, and they rough rode him.
Yeah,
they put him in the back,
of the
and he showed up with a broken neck,
broken spine thing. Yeah.
But what was most fascinating is how the Baltimore police has direct ties to the old slave chasers, like the institution that the Boston police came out of were the people that were rounding up runaway slaves. Like, there's a direct continuity between those institutions. So they start there, they end, locking people up in the back of a...
Yeah.
I don't know how you drive in a way that breaks someone's neck, but I don't buy that. Anyhow.
Yeah, and are they
stuff.
laughing?
Yeah.
That's my feeling is they're like,
And whatever I think what what people want to say is those are rare, isolated cases, and what we're seeing is the popularization of technology that allows us to focus on.
That's true. I mean, there's no question that is true. Police officers, when they shoot a black person in the back and kill them, and somebody gets on YouTube, that's all we're going to watch. Nobody's going to take a video of the police going to the domestic violence thing and says, okay, do you feel like you're threatened? Why don't you come with me and I'll take you to a hospital? Yeah. Okay. I mean, nobody cares, right? Yeah. And of course, that's 99.9% of their job all the time. They do a good job. I don't want this to feel like police kill every black person that they come across. I mean, I'm sure that white cops help black men often, but there is a societal, cultural problem between black men and police that cannot be ignored. I mean, that the Black Lives Matter thing is a uprising based on something that's there. It's not just out of thin air.
But what I feel like would be helpful, like when those huge cases like Eric Garner, or like the man in South Carolina that was shot in the back running away, or Philandro Castile who had a permit for his gun, in these highly popularized cases, there ought to be not only indictments of those obviously wrong actions, but the policing community ought to stand up with the populace and say, this is horrible. I know. Instead of defending him, then it feels oppositional. I mean, why isn't the police labor union condemning these actions?
Yeah, this is not what police are. No, I agree.
The cops of all people should be making examples.
They do indict. They just don't convict.
Yeah.
But and then the only other thing I wrote here is pure power a corrupting influence in and of itself?
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about this with
corporations,
with material, material consumerism. But I think that when you walk in the room and everybody bows to you, that is a corrupting thing. That there's no way that it can't be.
Yeah.
And which again makes me feel like a good cop is somebody to be celebrated, because it's hard. I think that it would be hard to be a good cop. It'd be hard to be that guy that says, I'm not going to take that $5,000, even though all of you are, and now I'm putting myself on the outside, right?
Serpico. I want to hang out with Serpico.
Yeah. I mean, that movie just depressed the hell out of me. I saw the movie and I was like, okay, that's it. I mean, it's not possible to be a good cop. It's not possible. I mean, I think all cops, at least most cops, go in because you ask any cop, why'd you become a cop? Because I want to help people. But then 10 years later, you're in this miasma of greed and corruption, and I mean, I read a book about the O.J. Simpson, just very in-depth thing, and the
Mark Furman
part of the book was the history of the LAPD, and they did not have elected chiefs of police. Yeah. They hired from within, so there was no oversight. There was no oversight by the public whatsoever. They made the rules. So it just became the most corrupt police force in the entire country. It was like laughable how corrupt it was.
Yeah.
So
you were supposed to convince me I was wrong in this episode
about
police.
Well, you're wrong. You're wrong about being racist to any in any group. Like you said, it's like you don't know that cop, And honestly, when a cop comes up to me in the middle of the night with his hand on his gun and coming up to the car, I'm still going to feel sorry for him. I'm still going to feel like, man, that job is not a job I would want.
Yeah.
So I do feel a little bit like being a good cop and being a good person are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So, but what you said is, it's something that you recognize, and that you just have to work on. I mean, I don't hate cops. I hate bad cops. I see those YouTube videos and it's deplorable.
But you hate bad cops and you're not sure if there are good cops.
Well, I think they're good cops. I'm just not sure that they stay good cops. I'm not sure it's possible. I mean, I'm wouldn't be suggesting that my friend's father, who's captain of the Orlando police force, was a bad cop. I don't know. I don't know what his situation was. I like to assume that he wasn't on the take. He's a great guy. So.
Yeah. Well, if anybody knows any local Massachusetts, Boston area policemen that are friendly, officer friendly, I'll have them over for a barbecue. Let me know.
So hug a cop.
Hug a cop. That's our conclusion.
But if you're a black man, approach slowly with your hands empty, very slowly.
As you
hug a cop. But not low so that they think you're going for the gun.
And don't pat too hard.
Yeah.
Just one quick.
Yeah. And I did want to say one final thing about you were talking about crack cocaine versus crack versus cocaine, and I'm fascinated with true crime and serial killing, and it's one of my things. But something that I heard on one of these podcasts was, somebody gets convicted of rape, okay, and they get 5 years, and it's just like, oh, if only they had heroin on them, oh, if only there was just a tenth,
just a dime bag,
then they would have gotten 30 years, 40 years, right? It's
crazy.
Ridiculous.
Crazy.
Yeah. Okay, well, so we're gonna love cops.
Yes.
And I love you.
Or learn to love cops.
Love you.
Love you too.